If you earn a high income, one of the frustrating parts of retirement planning is that the tax code can start closing doors just as you become able to save more aggressively. A direct Roth IRA contribution is one example. At higher income levels, eligibility begins to phase out. So, many investors assume that once their income gets too high, meaningful Roth contributions are basically finished. But that is not necessarily true. If your workplace retirement plan has the right features, there may be another path that allowed you to move substantially more money into a Roth environment. That strategy is called the Mega Backdoor Roth, and despite the dramatic name, the basic idea is surprisingly simple. The complexity comes from understanding which bucket of the 401k you are actually using, how much space is available, and how the conversion is handled. So, before we get into the big numbers, let's make sure the strategy itself is completely clear. A Mega Backdoor Roth is not the same thing as a normal Backdoor Roth IRA. The normal backdoor Roth typically involves making a non-deductible contribution to a traditional IRA, and then converting that money to a Roth IRA. The Mega Backdoor Roth usually starts inside an employer-sponsored retirement plan. The sequence looks like this. First, you contribute money to the after-tax portion of your 401k. Then, ideally, that money is converted into a Roth account. That conversion may happen inside the plan through a Roth 401k or through an eligible rollover to a Roth IRA, depending on what the plan allows. The goal is to move money that has already been taxed into a Roth environment, where future qualified growth can potentially be tax-free. That sounds straightforward. But the reason this strategy becomes so powerful is the difference between the normal employee 401k contribution limit and the much larger total plan limit. And that gap is where the word mega starts to make sense.
For 2026, an employee under age 50 can generally defer up to $24,500 into a 401k. That is the limit most investors are familiar with. But there is another, much larger limit. The total annual additions limit for a defined contribution plan is generally $72,000 before applicable catch-up contributions. That larger number can include employee deferrals, employer contributions, and eligible after-tax employee contributions. So the opportunity is not that you suddenly get a $72,000 Roth contribution limit. That would be the wrong way to think about it. The opportunity comes from the remaining space between what has already gone into the plan and the $72,000 ceiling. If your plan allows after-tax contributions, that unused space may be available for the Mega Backdoor Roth strategy. But before you calculate that gap, there is one contribution investors often forget: the employer match. And employer money counts too. The $72,000 limit is shared. That means your own regular 401k contribution does not exist in isolation. Employer matching contributions, profit-sharing contributions, and eligible after-tax contributions can all consume part of the same annual additions limit. This is important because a generous employer contribution is great for your retirement, but it also reduces the amount of unused space available for after-tax contributions. For example, if two employees both contribute the same amount personally, but one receives a much larger employer contribution, that employee may have less room for a Mega Backdoor Roth. So the calculation should always start with the full picture. How much are you contributing? How much is your employer contributing? And how much total space remains before reaching the annual plan limit? Once you know those three numbers, the strategy becomes much easier to visualize. So let's run through a simple example. Imagine an employee under age 50 contributes the full $24,500 to the regular 401k. Now suppose the employer contributes another $10,000 during the year. Together, that is $34,500 already inside the plan. If the total annual additions limit is $72,000, that leaves $37,500 of potential remaining space. If the plan allows eligible after-tax employee contributions, that $37,500 could potentially be contributed into the after-tax bucket. Then, ideally, that after-tax money is converted to Roth. That is the Mega Backdoor Roth mechanism. But notice something important. You did not contribute $72,000 directly into Roth. Part of that total came from the normal employee contribution. Part came from the employer. and only the remaining portion entered through the after-tax pathway. That distinction matters because the strategy only works if your plan actually supports the necessary features, and there are two features you need to look for. The first requirement is simple. Your 401k plan must allow employee after-tax contributions beyond the normal elective deferral limit. Not every plan does. The second requirement is just as important. There needs to be a practical way to move that after-tax money into Roth. That can happen through an in-plan Roth conversion, or if the plan allows it, through an in-service distribution or rollover to a Roth IRA. If your plan offers both features, the strategy can be extremely efficient. If it offers only the after-tax contributions feature but no usable conversion path, you may end up leaving money in the after-tax bucket where future earnings can become taxable. And if the plan does not allow after-tax contributions at all, there may be no Mega Backdoor Roth opportunity in that plan. This is why plan design matters more than simply having a high salary. And there's one terminology issue that causes a huge amount of confusion here. After-tax 401k contributions are not the same thing as Roth 401k contributions. Inside a 401k, you can have several different tax buckets. A traditional pre-tax 401k contribution gives you a tax benefit now, but qualified withdrawals are generally taxable later. A Roth 401k contribution is made with after-tax dollars, and qualified withdrawals can potentially be tax-free. Then there is a third category, non-Roth after-tax 401k contributions. This money has already been taxed, but it is not automatically Roth money. That difference is the key. The contribution itself is after-tax basis, but any earnings that accumulate before conversion can have pre-tax character and may create taxes when you eventually move the money. So the Mega Backdoor Roth strategy depends on using this third bucket as a temporary holding area. Contribute after-tax money, then convert it into Roth efficiently. The longer it sits unconverted, the more opportunity there is for taxable earnings to build up. And that timing issue is where one of the most common mistakes. If this is the kind of retirement strategy you want explained without the usual jargon, subscribe to Boring Money Wins and hit the like button. Because with strategies like this, the small mechanical details are what determine whether the tax advantage actually works. And the next detail is one of the most important. Making the after-tax contribution is only half the strategy. The conversion is what moves that money into the Roth environment. And if you wait too long, earnings can start accumulating in the wrong bucket. So let's look at why faster conversions can make a meaningful difference. Suppose you make a $10,000 after-tax contribution. If your plan converts that money to Roth almost immediately, there may be very little time for earnings to accumulate before the conversion. That can make the tax impact relatively small. Now compare that with leaving the same $10,000 in the after-tax bucket for months. If the investments rise, the account may now contain $10,000 of after-tax basis plus additional earnings. The basis has already been taxed, but those earnings may be taxable when converted. That is why some plans offer automatic in-plan Roth conversions. When available, that can make the process much cleaner. Money goes into the after-tax bucket and is converted quickly, limiting the amount of pre-conversion growth. The goal is not to perfectly eliminate every dollar of taxable earnings. The goal is to minimize unnecessary time outside the Roth environment. Once the plan allows the conversion, you still have another decision. Where should the money go? Inside the 401k or out to a Roth IRA? There are two common routes. The first is an in-plan Roth conversion. The money moves from the after-tax 401k bucket into the Roth 401k portion of the same employer plan. This can be simple and operationally efficient. The second route, when the plan allows it, is an in-service rollover to a Roth IRA. That can give you access to a broader range of investments and more control outside the employer plan. But neither route is automatically better. A good 401k with low fees and excellent investment choices may be perfectly attractive. A Roth IRA may offer more flexibility. The real limitation is that you do not get to choose freely if your plan does not support the route you want. The plan document controls what is available. And once money contains both after-tax basis and pre-tax earnings, The rollover rules become more important. This is where people can accidentally create taxes simply by moving the money incorrectly. After-tax money and earnings are not treated the same way. Imagine your after-tax account contains $100,000. Maybe $95,000 is after-tax basis and $5,000 represents investment earnings. Those two pieces can have different tax characteristics. Under the applicable rollover rules, it may be possible to direct the after-tax portion to a Roth destination while sending associated pre-tax amounts to a traditional tax-deferred destination. But the transaction needs to be structured correctly. That is why simply requesting a random withdrawal is not the best approach. You want to understand how your plan separates bases and earnings, which destinations are allowed, and how the distribution will be reported. This is one of those areas where a qualified tax professional or plan administrator can be worth involving, especially with large balances. The broader principle is simple. The Mega Backdoor Roth is powerful because of tax treatment, so the transfer itself needs to preserve that treatment. And when it works correctly, the long-term compounding benefit can become substantial. The real appeal of the Mega Backdoor Roth is not the contribution itself. It is what can happen over the next 20 or 30 years. Imagine two investors with the same starting amount and the same investment return. One invests the money in a taxable brokerage account. The other gets the same money into a Roth environment. In the taxable account, dividends may create recurring taxes. Realized capital gains may create taxes, and over time, those taxes can reduce the amount left to compound. Inside the Roth environment, qualified growth can potentially compound without that same annual tax drag. The longer the time horizon, the more meaningful that difference can become. For a high earner who has already filled the obvious retirement accounts and still has substantial savings capacity, that can be extremely valuable. But this is where I would add an important warning. A tax-efficient strategy is not automatically the best use of every extra dollar. There are situations where maxing out a Mega Backdoor Roth should not be your first priority. I would not treat the Mega Backdoor Roth as something you must maximize at any cost. If you are carrying high-interest debt, that may deserve attention first. If your emergency fund is weak, liquidity may matter more. If your 401k has expensive investment options or unusually high plan fees, additional contributions deserve more scrutiny. And if you expect to need the money for a major near-term goal, locking more capital inside retirement accounts may reduce your flexibility. This is the difference between tax optimization and financial planning. Taxes are one variable. Liquidity, risk, debt, cash flow, and investment quality matter too. A strategy can be excellent from a tax perspective and still be wrong for your overall financial situation. So, the sequence matters. Build the financial foundation first, then optimize taxes. And even if everything looks good personally, high earners can run into another limitation that comes from the employer plan itself. Seeing an after-tax contribution option in your 401k does not automatically mean you can contribute every remaining dollar up to the annual limit. Some plans impose their own contribution caps, and highly compensated employees can be affected by non-discrimination testing and other plan-specific rules. In certain cases, contributions can be restricted or even corrected later, so the IRS maximum is not always the same as your personal usable maximum. This is why high earners should check the actual plan documents rather than relying only on the headline federal limit. Look for the summary plan description. Ask whether after-tax contributions are capped. Ask whether automatic Roth conversion is available. Ask whether in-service rollovers are allowed. And ask whether highly compensated employees face additional limits. Once you have those answers, the strategy stops being theoretical. You can calculate the actual opportunity available to you, and that leads to a simple checklist for putting everything together. Here is the 2026 Mega Backdoor Roth framework in one sequence. First, decide how much you want to contribute through the normal 401k route. Second, know exactly how much your employer is contributing. Third, calculate how much annual addition space remains. Fourth, confirm that your plan allows non-Roth
after-tax employee contributions. Fifth, confirm that there is a usable Roth conversion route either inside the plan or through an eligible rollover. Then convert efficiently so that unnecessary taxable earnings do not accumulate before the money reaches Roth. And finally, invest the Roth balance with a long-term strategy that actually matches your goals and risk tolerance. The biggest mistake is thinking the Mega Backdoor Roth is a secret loophole available to every high earner. It is not. It is a legitimate retirement plan strategy that becomes powerful when three things line up: high savings capacity, unused plan space, and the right employer plan design. When those pieces are present, high earners can potentially move far more money into a Roth environment than the normal Roth IRA limit would suggest. And over decades, that additional tax-free growth potential can become one of the most valuable parts of a retirement strategy.